Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, so this is work joint with Catherine, who's actually, she looks like she's hiding back there. She is literally underneath the desk. That is Catherine, and Deb is sitting right next to her. So if you have, she's not quick enough to hide, I guess. Okay, so the theme of this talk is essentially, can we take something that has been arguably designed for business, the Sharepoint platform by Microsoft, can we take that and use that for scientific collaboration? And toward the end of the talk, we'll mention how we are attempting to generalize this. And so we're going to start off by describing some of the successes and not so successes applying this to a particular eScience collaboration. So I love starting off with this slide again from Jim Gray, because it really sort of keeps us focused. Big problems. We saw this slide on Tony's talk this morning. The big problems, how do we take data, perhaps logically or physically bring it into one place? How do we organize it, reorganize it? How do we ask the right questions? How do we get the right answers? So this is really about how we can organize data, how we can get information from it, how can we work with others, essentially.
Some of those facts are lost.
So we already have a heckler in the back. It took me about 3 minutes for... Okay. Okay, yeah, facts. They're lies, some of them. Okay. So here's our very applications-driven scenario. We're working with scientists who have set up these sensing stations. This is a depiction of where they are across the world. They have been running for a number of years. They've been collecting data. Problem statement is, how do we bring the data into a situation such that the scientists can look at what they have, they can analyze, they can make scientific discovery. This is both on a smaller scale on the particular data they're looking for, and on a much larger scale. So can we create a platform in which scientists can, for example, do some analysis on all the data? So we have 950 plus site years, 250 plus sites across 35 plus countries. How do scientists do discovery on this? So we spent a while coming up with the software architecture to facilitate this. It starts with the towers generating the data. Essentially, we bring it down into a situation where we can do analysis, some gap-filling analysis, quality control analysis down here. That unto itself is probably not the best way to look at the physical data itself. And so we spent a lot of time, Catherine and Deb in particular, coming up with appropriate representations, data cube technology in which to view the data. We also put the data directly into a SQL Server. And then this is where this talk is really focused. The data itself is going to be stored collectively into SQL Server. We're going to have cube technology as well. But that unto itself is not enough for the scientists to be able to work together to come up with hypotheses, to view the data. The collaboration platform we're going to use is Sharepoint. And so we're going to use the Sharepoint technology to create different views of the data, different pages, different ways to enter data, different ways to report that certain data is wrong, that type of thing. So I'm sure most people are not so familiar with Sharepoint. Sharepoint is a technology based on, fundamentally, you have IIS, you have the web server technology underneath it. Then you have a number of different capabilities built on top of it. This, again, has largely been designed and tailored and used by a huge number of businesses. Microsoft has its own SharePoint conference that's actually running next week. A large number of people attend this and use this on a daily basis, again, for business. And we're going to attempt to leverage this platform for science. So this is a picture of the front page that we came up with. And at this point, I think it makes sense to just show the site running live. And hopefully the web page is live and we can get access to it. So we have a public view that we see here. This is what the general public encounters when they come to it. There's a number of different tabs that the public can get access to, such as the data set information. You can scroll down to different parts of it to see, again, publicly, well, we probably didn't want that page, publicly available information about the web page. I'm downloading something. I'm not sure how the web is going to be working right now, so we may have to cut out of this. Oh. We have the ability to serve up via Excel services certain information about the data set, again, from a public perspective. Fundamentally, we have a public view of this, we have a data provider view of this, and we have what we call a proposer view of this, which is the people who are attempting to use the data. And so if you register with our site as a particular role and you're authorized to be in that role, then you'll see a different view of the collaboration site. To show you an example of how the content is tailored for a particular role, we can sign in as in the proposer role. And you'll see, in addition to our public view, we have additional tabs that have shown up across the top. And I just want to highlight a couple of these. Again, these are capabilities that you would see if you're attempting to be a consumer of the data. And so one of the first ways in which the data might be used, the proposer view, would be in the data download capability. Here we have set up the ability to select particular data towers or select all sites, select a particular type of the information, hourly or daily, and for a certain number of years. And so this is the way that the proposer, the people who want to use the data, can pull it back to their site and they can use it and collaborate that way. We also have the ability to interactively browse the data. Again, this is a number of different capabilities that we've established. Actually, Deb and Catherine, more than anything else, have established in working with the scientists how would they like to interactively explore the data. And so if we looked at disturbance data, what this is doing is it's in real time talking to SQL Server in the background where the data is actually held. It's generating an Excel rendering in the browser of the particular information, in this case, the disturbance information. And then the scientist, I guess I pulled up a not so great example, but normally we would pull the data up and the scientist has the ability to do a deep dive into certain parts of the data via the browser interface. Last capability I wanted to briefly mention for the proposer, again, the user of the data. The user of the data may have a particular desire or need to update and correct certain data. And so one of the capabilities we have is what we call ancillary data update. Ancillary data is arguably the metadata of the description of what's going on. So here we have the ability for the person to make suggestions to the correction of certain amounts of data. And again, this is the capability that the proposer would see. And so if the proposer had pulled down particular collection of data from a particular site, then we can, via the web interface, submit the corrected version of the data via this functionality. So I wanted to log out of here. I wanted to briefly show you one of the main other roles that we have established for the site, which is the data provider. And so I want to authenticate as that role. And again, the user is now presented with different capabilities across the top. In addition to the ancillary data update, which is what we saw a moment ago, again, that's for submitting corrections to the metadata itself. We also have the ability for the data provider to, for example, view the information about their particular data that they've contributed. In this case, it would be the info about my site. And it's grinding away. So this is a web-based rendering of the particular sites that I have provided. In this case, there's a number of different sites that we have simulated that this person has provided. In this case, one of our colleagues, the Tanzi Ranch and the Varaya Ranch. Another capability that the tower is able to do is to submit information, updating the information about their particular tower as well. So let me get back to the presentation. And so we've been running this for about a year and a half or 2 years. And we've established a number of different capabilities. This was some backup slides in case the web wasn't working. And so here are, to date, the collection of capabilities that we have added to and based upon Sharepoint. And so we have the public-facing information, which describes the data, describes the collection of people who are attempting to do science based on the data. We call it the paper writing information. We have the ability to access the raw data, and we also have the ability to do some web-based presentation of the data as well. We have facilitated an email communication path depending on the different roles that you have authenticated on. So for example, if you want to see who is using your data, if you want to send an update to anyone who is currently trying to do science based on your data, that's one of the capabilities that we have after you've authenticated as the tower owner. The leadership as well can send in information to particular people. This is the steering committee information. The paper coordinator, the leader of the teams that are attempting to do the science on the papers, on the data itself, they have the ability to send email to all the collection of data that they're using for their science. We mentioned that we had the ability to correct the ancillary data to submit potential corrections to the data. And we have the a separate tab to review those submissions and make corrections based on the requests, and to then update the data afterwards. To date, this is a screenshot of the collection of papers that are being pursued based on the flux data information. We actually have 78 paper writing teams that are currently going on right now. Again, this is the list from behind. We have 85 registered users. 85 registered tower owners, the people who are contributing data. We have 85 of them registered with the system right now. We have 80 proposers who are registered with the system right now. Again, it's been operating for about 2 years, and so things are really starting to pick up speed. So we in taking Sharepoint, the reason why we did that was we had a number of different design philosophies we wanted to do. We knew that we could put the data and store the data in SQL Server, and we really needed a collaboration platform that would augment that. And basically, the design principles that we came up with are enumerated here. We needed something that was simple, something that was usable right out of the box. I personally have been involved in a lot of the grid projects, and they frankly tended to end up being a whole bunch of, Deb is smiling because she knows what I'm going to say, tended to end up being a whole bunch of software that was written that the end scientists didn't want to use. And I was actually kind of sick of being involved with those projects. So we were trying to get something that frankly, as computer scientists, we had to do as little as possible. And so we structured everything on SharePoint. We wrote a number of different customizations, but basically we found that SharePoint was working well for us. As an indication of the success of SharePoint for this particular collection of scientists, they have asked us to, in effect, use the platform for the next iteration of data, so to speak. I didn't describe that very well. Would you two describe that better?
Basically, in the next set of FluxNet data, they want to actually have versions of the data set. The first version of the data set was only available to people who had provided data. And in the next version of the data set, they want to actually have a lot of the data be available publicly, some amount of it be available to a broader community than just themselves, but still in a closed environment, and then some of the data will only be available to the data providers. And so this form was to allow them to elect, in fact, for each of those, what they actually want to have their policy be for their particular site area out of those 3 policies.
Now, the only thing I'll add to that is the data producers, the people who own the towers, right? I think in general, you can correct me when I misspeak, because I know I will. But they in general want to make the data as open and as free as possible, except they kind of can't because they're at times because it's their data. They have to produce the scientific results from it. In some sense, if they just create the data and they just freely put it out there, then arguably they go out of business because it's the other people writing the papers. And so there's that tension there if they want to make it open, but at times they can't. And so this is in part addressing that, meaning do you want to make it directly open, or do you want reservations and maintain control over it? Another thing that we've kind of recently added, we've been asked to add, is really interesting from my perspective. It's more of a community building thing. We have a number of, they have called themselves young scientists. That wouldn't necessarily be my name for it, but they want to establish some networking capability, some networking site where people who are perhaps in the early stages of their career can sort of talk to each other and try to network and try to establish a friendship and a collaboration. This is some site that we set up for them, and they're just starting to use this. It's the Young Scientist Network, and so that's just starting to pick up speed as well. So now we're in the position that we've run the system for a couple of years. We think it's pretty successful, and now we want to apply it to other eScience collaborations. And so we've stepped back from it a little bit, and we've established that there are a number of different roles that we're really facilitating here. We have the public role, we have arguably the data consumer role, the data producers, leadership committee, and the data curators. And can we create generic capabilities that you can plug into SharePoint for your particular scientific collaboration? We've just started doing this, and we've been making some progress based on SharePoint 2007, which is what we're deployed right now. SharePoint 2010 actually comes out next week, and so we're kind of holding off to make sure that what we've built works for that platform as well. But we are very much interested in taking these capabilities and applying them to different situations, different synthesis type environments. More specifically, the functionality that we've had to create for the platform is actually, it hasn't really been that much, which is what we intended actually. We've had to write some functionality for account creation and management. That's the management of the roles, in particular the data owner and the data provider and the data consumer. We've had to create those web parts, is what they're called in SharePoint terminology. We've had to create it for data contribution and metadata contribution. We've also created some functionality for browsing, for data download. We want to also expand this somewhat to model support as well. The collaboration part of it, it's interesting. We haven't actually had to write so much of our own specialized code, which is just fine with us. The platform itself has a lot of capabilities already built into it, again, arguably for business, but still applicable to the sciences. And so we haven't had to do so much of this so far. We're going to put the collection of capabilities on Codeplex. Again, we haven't done it to date because we're waiting to confirm how well or what modifications we have to make for SharePoint 2010. Again, that's out next week, and so we should be able to put something up fairly quickly, and we're hoping to build a community around these web parts for eScience. So, in summary, we found that the SharePoint platform has been working pretty well for us. And so I would say that if you have this type of synthesis environment, this type of distributed data environment, where you have one or more producers and one or more consumers, if you desire as little custom code as possible, if you want a browser interface as much as possible, if you think this won't work for you because the data is distributed, meaning that I was reviewing some of my notes from the first time I taught distributed systems, which was in the late 90s. There was the argument that, oh, we have to have this distributed system because, in effect, our networks are so lousy that we couldn't possibly move the data around. Well, that's just not so true anymore. And so if you think that this won't work because your data is distributed and it has to be distributed, any of that, then you should talk with us, and we'd be very eager to work with you to customize our SharePoint parts to help solve the problems that you might be seeing. And with that, I wrap up.
but it seems like it might be a little more heterogeneous, and so I'm wondering how well it would adapt. So in particular, the database scheme would change kind of periodically. So older data sets have a different scheme than the current one, and in particular, some of the data have licensing restrictions where only people who actually signed the license get to see it, as opposed to other data which are public. Anyone who has signed up can see it. Yeah.
Catherine, would you like to take this question?
We absolutely do. Very heterogeneous data set. Harvard Climate Science is one of the first science law because it spans micrometeorology, soil science, as well as biology. And in fact, one of the things that happens when you go to one of their meetings is they will all distinguish amongst themselves as to what you really are. You're not really trying to do a report or doing. So please come back with it. I suspect a lot of conversations people need to do. And one of the things that's great about this collaboration is that you're relatively implementer and someone who really understands how to operate people.
But the diverse access is actually, I mean, one of the things that Sharepoint has really done very nicely, because I can just sit there and put people in their appropriate roles. They see exactly the right tabs, and I'm not even think about it. I mean, Marty has to think about it, but I don't. Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I've kind of harped on this, but one of the things I'll harp yet again on is there's a huge community in the business world using this, which means that there's a huge community exercising the capabilities, and so there's a whole bunch of feedback going to Microsoft all the time, and so this is always getting exercised and improved. And I'd like to think that we are just the happy recipients of those improvements. That's kind of a nice thing that we get kind of for free. Jeff, did you or Paul? Or which one of you has a better question?
Yeah, one more question.
Hands up who won an award this morning.
I get to see these people wonder.
My question is around the authentication. Do you have a make use of some sort of federated authentication provider? Because SharePoint seems to be used within an organization, not cross organization. So we looked at SharePoint a while ago, and I wanted to try to do something like Sugarland or something like that. I didn't want to sort of set up the roles, the logins, but the thing that work coming from a particular organization. Right? They're not all on directly.
So, right. So, the question is about authentication. Paul says they didn't want to, in effect, manage an in-house authentication. I respect that very much. That said, we decided that Active Directory was pretty good, and so essentially we had to map sort of, how do I want to put this? We wanted to tap into Active Directory as much as possible because it's just used all the time in different situations. We wrote a small custom functionality that in effect allowed someone to request an account. You can imagine this is not very sophisticated code, which it wasn't. That request would come in essentially to one of us, actually Deb more than anyone else. She would then create, she and her team would create the account in Active Directory that was running specifically for this. That was annoying, but that said, once you have that, you can tap into roles. Active Directory is very, that was Active Directory. My integration with my browser, again, you want to sort of, I think I want a certain maturity coming from Active Directory. Creating the accounts was a little annoying, but once you created them, it was okay.
If I could add, there's a large community of open source that's built on top of SharePoint, and there's one
Give him a round of applause.